Hello, welcome to another episode of Global Pause, Rethink the Future. So we're going to kick off from a recent podcast that we did when I talked about social credit systems and look at this in light of like what I've been talking about as far as the praxis goes, and to understand the nature of credit and the way how this would work within the ecosystem, I suppose, because in the last one that I did touch upon, that if, say, the pretext using, say, health as a pretext, if you can introduce ways of inhibiting the clearing mechanism of the market by qualifying people first, so therefore to either qualify them as far as temporalising place, so maybe that's a concert, through ensuring that if they've got a vaccination passport or somewhat. And you can already see that at the moment. I think that the European Union has got something in play for 2026 where they have 2022, where it does have the vaccination within their passport. Now, I don't know whether or not that means that the only way that you can get into the EU as far as international travel goes, but that indicates what I'm kind of referring to. It's essentially qualifying you to whether or not you're worthy of going to that place by qualifying it that has nothing else other than your bare life. And because if you're talking about the potential risk in inverted commas and the way how they play upon security, sovereign power does to determine the biopolitics that's basically very much put into play. Well, like that is just highlighting the issue to either, or to pre-qualify you, and then to make the determination that you are either worthy of it or you're not. So qualifying life actually in that regard, it kind of is a qualification. So because we would like to think that if you're not risk, so here we go, risk, used to be on a watch list, I suppose, for terrorists as far as like literally for violence and maybe incendiary language and anything that would be considered to be provoking kind of violence or would be potentialised into violence if you were to come into the country. In the context here now, it's kind of shifted from the marginal figure, as it were, always the figure that's always used to engender security. So always the marginal figure, whether or not it's a terrorist or it was communists, any of the kind of the shadow figures that you can kind of puppet in order to say that we need to do this to ensure your security. Well, now it's shifted to obviously within people. So how can you the only way that you can qualify a person as to whether or not they're not a threat or not is by evidencing it through these pre-qualification. So what is worthy? You are worthy of coming in. So that the nature, but that's so you're given credit. So I want to talk about that, but in context to a way of life. So if you literally are looking at the way how you can potentialise your time beyond the economic good, and so that is to remove money that would otherwise be a given. The context here is that credit is still put into play, all right? Because what is credit? Credit is ultimately the credit that we would bequeath, credit that is given for change, or credit that would become a legacy. So, because literally if the only way that you can secure your life is by securing the credit towards that, then obviously removing the money doesn't mean to say that credit is all of a sudden disappears. Obviously, it's now it's unattached from what we would consider to be the simulacrum of it, which is money, like the sign. But that doesn't mean to say that it doesn't exist in inverted commas when you have removed money. So how does it animate? Basically, is what I'm getting. How would it be? How would credit be given that qualifies you in the same manner that, say, the state would disqualify you from a place, but this would work in the inverse manner, that it would actually qualify you to temporalise place, because you are essentially demonstrating that you are part of the community, and not only are you part of it, but it's demonstrated what you have what you have done, and so you're given credit for what you have done, that you actually, your actions demonstrate that you are. So if you're looking at it from the qualitative difference between one and the other, one qualifies you for, one basically, and obviously it works both ways. One, it's you're either in and you're out, and the other one works for you in and you're out. But if we're looking at what we're potentializing, we're looking at the way how we can engender creativity, a richness of life. The other one, our way of life, this presupposes that we're all autistic beings, that we are detemporalizing place, that you are individualized to the point of being absolutely powerless, that you don't create the world, and that, any kind of understanding of what drives history is driven by people in power, but not actually the no ones that substantiates the way of life, which is obviously what it does. I mean, the only reason why the things are the way that they are is because we accept them to be the way they are. And that's, I suppose, one of the, the aspirations for any kind of form of revolution, inverted commas, is always driven by change. But my problem is that when you get beholden to narratives that can serve power, and then that's the issue. So invariably, it's the nature of what the blight is, what's the underlying cause of the issue. And I presuppose that the underlying cause is the marginal way that we receive ourselves. It's a spiritual issue. And in that manner, it actually, whether or not you're beholden to, whether or not you're Christian or any kind of religious denomination, and you realise that there's something wrong in the world, or say that you're liberal or you're secularist, and you still recognise there's something wrong in the world, it's a way of reconciling differences, I have to admit, from the way how that you're looking at the underlying issue. Because a lot of people, like, if you consider the aspect of marginality, and I always say that marginal figures are always given in order to substantiate a certain praxis towards what would constitute justice. But if the primordial marginality exists between every single person, irrespective of the identity that you would like to claim for yourself, well, then obviously if it does, and like I said, we're all market orientated, so it does. There's nothing that you can't get around it. So if you get beholden to identity or the marginality of your identity, but what is the most marginal figure that we presuppose for our way of life? And it's the no one that we all are. We're all markets. We're all fucking mass blob. So you can't get any more marginal than basically a person that doesn't even fucking exist. All right, and the only way that you exist is that you're defined for your consumption. You can't get much more marginal than that. All right, and so when you're looking at that, you're potentializing the no one to be the first earthling. This is the way I always frame it. I frame it as that the first earthling is literally every single one of us. We all can be the first earthling. If you're looking at it from, if our way of life, we're all market orientated, and so we all share the same model for life. Okay, but to be fucking no ones, to have aspirational branding to tell us that we're something that we're fucking not, to be orientated towards lifestyle obsession, so, the modelling of life, and yet we don't question the way towards it. Well, you are a blob, you are no one, you are marginal, and you are a spectre, you're a ghost. Okay, so you can't get more marginal than that, but you've got to understand the way how we become marginal, the way how we don't temporalise place, the way we're beholden to an unavowed utopianism. And if you understand that, then anything else that follows will be derivative from that. So when you're looking at how do you potentialise your time beyond the economic good in order to temporalise place, you're literally looking at the credit for the animation of that possibility or creation. So in the manner of, say, the person that would be, so it always works from business. The business has to potentialise the person. So I'm going to frame this in this context of a person that gives and a person that receives. So outside the context of whether or not it's a business that initiates it or like labour or a person. So from being inside a business that's working for a business, because it really just works on the giving and the receiving. I touched upon this in a prior episode. It all comes down to the way how we give and the way how we receive ourselves, and that is determined by the way how we do that. The way how we give and the way how we receive determines the self that we receive and the self that we give. All right, so if we're means to an end, then we receive ourselves as marginal towards that end, and it just presupposes that we're marginal because it creates a circuit of presupposition that feeds upon itself, a vicious circle. So we're marginal. So if we presuppose that we're indivisible, then we have to act indivisible. We will give ourselves indivisibly, and we will receive ourselves as such. It's fucking simple as that. It's just so easy to understand when you look at that. But because we've got everything backwards, we have to put the end first. We have to give of ourselves. This is why the orientation on this thing, because you're dealing with the acculturation of a way of life that's, a good 100 years maybe in the making, primarily a market-orientated way of life, it means to say that to kind of frame this is going to, there's certain kind of maybe people can understand it to a degree, but you have to implement it with other people. And this is the point. If you don't implement it with other people and potentialize you and just to give of yourself where maybe you're a little bit more, precarious or that you would otherwise be because you're the insecurity, but I always come back to the culture is the security, all right? It's not the power that secures for you. It's literally your way of life is the security, all right? And we tend not to look at culture like that because we don't have a culture, all right? We've removed culture. How can you say you have a culture when your relation is defined by want, when you're beholden to an unavowed utopianism? How can you say that culture exists? It might exist as something to consume, a cultural activity, but it hardly constitutes culture when you're looking at it like that because culture is indivisible. So if you're looking at our way of life, and our way of life has seriously reduced our scope of our vision towards life and towards the world in that which we share, you cannot. It's a diminution of culture to the point of its absolute obliteration. And you can even say that it's nihilistic, and so it doesn't even exist. Once again, it's always the perspective on these things when you can make a judgment like that. But I presume to make a judgment. So when I'm looking at the way how we give and receive, all right, so a person gives, all right, in the scenario of them giving, all right, they don't receive credit for that. They receive they don't receive credit for it. Okay, why do I say that? Because they've given, all right. So it's like a loss. So there's a potential there because what we're doing, we're potentializing the way how we give and receive. All right, so there's a potential. It's only when they receive that they receive, I suppose, the credit for their prior action. All right, but the problem here, not the problem, but we've got to look at it. You're giving the potential to receive credit, all right, in the time given that we allow this thing to manifest itself. All right, because if you're thinking of the time given for it to allow, so the allowance is really important because this is where art comes into it. It's an artful way of life. So you literally are removing the constraint of time. So when you're looking at a person that gives, the time allowed is part of the art that can be engendered, but it has to be potentialized first because you are potentializing your time beyond the economic good that you otherwise receive it as. So you can say what is the credit that they receive? Okay, so what credit do they receive? When finally they receive credit through receiving in the manner that they gave. So in the same context. So they gave where they just gave, where it would have presupposed an exchange, and now that they receive in the same manner that they received, but just with the time, the allowance. So, but what do they get credit for when they receive whatever it is that occurred? So when one receives, because this is the thing, it changes the way how you receive. So let's think about, in that context, if you're giving yourself credit for you receiving that, are you not substituting yourself for money? Okay, so let's think of when we receive something because we're paid for it, we have credit to pay for it, yes? So because I have money, and so that's kind of credit. And so from our market-orientated way of life, for me to receive something, I have to pay for it. So I have the credit in order to receive. But in the context of the person that gave prior, now their reception, are they receiving credit? Is the credit their reception of what they got? Is it connected to what they receive? So therefore they embody the credit. So they become like living money like that. All right. So that's one way to kind of frame this. All right, but in that regards, what are they doing? What does that mean? That mean to a certain degree, that means to say that you're kind of cancelling out the claim that would otherwise that is kind of set in play, because indirectly, this thing might work indirectly, but when you give and then at a later date you receive, and that what you do is that you temporalize the credit that you would give in the context of you receiving something, it's almost like making it an exchange, but a one that's delayed. So, but in that regards, and this is the issue why it might seem kind of a bit strange to put it like this, but is this any way different from the way how that you would go and buy something? Because the question that I ask is that when you buy something, can you be truly grateful for you receiving something? Okay, so that's the answer. Like, can you? You've got the money, all right? You have money, so that's your credit. And so I go buy something. Should I be thankful for the person that gave me something when basically I bought it from them? And that's our everydayness. I mean, it might seem kind of really harsh that we should always feel that we should be thankful, and this is half the problem with our way of giving and receiving, is that we don't allow gratitude to be engendered in the mean of our existence. This is the whole problem, where we have no reverence towards life because of the way how we give and receive. But in the context of a person that is given prior and then received prior, if they're given credit for what they receive now, are they just acting like they had money? Can they be grateful, is what I'm saying? Because then what they're doing is that they're connecting up what they gave at an earlier stage with what occurred now. So can we say that? Or is there something that is greater than? Okay, what would be a greater than that claims that is actually the engendering of a gratitude? Because if you say, like, let's say that you presuppose I gave at a certain stage and then I receive now, and so therefore I make the equivocation that I connect the 2 points of my temporality, and so therefore I have credit for what I receive now, and so therefore I'm not grateful now. But can you be? Because this is the thing. So, are you grateful? Like, what would you be grateful for in that context if you can say that you can be grateful? Because in that regards, you have received from a person that the way how this thing we could work it, you never know when you would. So it's the fact that you might think that you might have the presentiment that this would occur, but you never know when it will land on you. And so when it lands on you, where you've got the framing of it, but what you're doing is you're framing it in a way where you're disposing of the credit that you would otherwise give to yourself. Now, why do I say that? Why is that important? Because it opens up you being grateful. All right, so grateful for what? Well, if your gratitude in this context has to do with the culture that you are in fact engendering, but that is beyond you, is beyond your act, is what I'm saying to you. All right, so think about it, that if you've got one person doing it and another person doing it, and that person's doing the same thing as you, and you're doing the same thing as them, but then there's other people doing the same thing, then the gratitude, the way how that you dispose of the credit that you would otherwise like to level off, that you're giving and you're receiving at that thing, so it acts like an exchange. There's something that works within the context of disposing of credit to engender the gratitude that relates to basically the whole culture. Okay, and what is that? Well, it's what is engendered as a result of acting contra to the given. So gratefulness here is that you are part of a way of life that allows this to be grateful towards life. So you are allowing, by disposing of the credit that you would otherwise appropriate in that context, because it's one act in context of a whole engendering of a way. So that we're talking about innumerable people doing the same thing. You cannot never give credit for yourself in that manner, because it's beyond you. So I always talk about the indivisibility of our temporality and the marginal way how we receive ourselves, but then the marginal way how we can use the creativity that's left fallow to animate culture. This is what I'm talking about. So when you've got everybody that's doing the same thing and working in a marginal way, you literally are animating a cultural dynamism that otherwise wasn't given. So how can you take credit for that, is what I'm getting at. You can't. So it subsumes it's so far. I think it's a really good author named Jean-Luc Marion. Is a philosopher, a phenomenologist, and he deals with the saturated phenomena. There's a one thing that he talks about in just being given, because this guy just talks about, it's being given. So, but the thing that's being given in this context just it eludes, or it's too large for it to fill within the category that you would otherwise define it in. So therefore, there's this thing about the abundance that overflows even the credit that you would like to claim, all right, to be grateful for something like that. So to dispose of the credit that you will otherwise appropriate. Now, it works in, like I said, everything works marginally. So it's the degrees in which this works, but you temporalize it enough. That's essentially what you're doing, is that you are removing the credit that you would otherwise give to yourself, and it opens up a gratitude towards life, to the culture that you shared in the creation of engendering, but then it works towards life. And what is it? To be grateful towards the indivisibility of life. This is where I'm going with this thing. It's all marginal, but it ultimately gets towards the end of being grateful towards life. So you're looking at just being grateful to that person there in that moment, the what of maybe the object or whatever it is that you received. So therefore, the thing that was received and now is imbued with a gratitude that you otherwise don't get when you feel that you just bought something. So if we're looking at the way how we can do things artfully and the way how things are given artfully, it's what is to be given artfully other than to be given with a sense of gratitude to the way how you receive something, the way how you receive your life. So you're literally looking at the earth, people, the community, the world that you share with other people, where you share it in that space, you are literally opening yourself up. This is the way how, when you're temporalizing place through making an exception that might occur, and you're potentializing your time beyond the economic good, and you're temporalizing place, what you do are literally opening up your ability to be grateful to receive life as indivisible. All right, to feel that we don't have to have credit for our lives. It seems ridiculous to think that we need to take credit for our lives. Just think of like what that means. We always, because why? Because we always think that we like to take credit for our lives because, or do we think of them as being a gift? A lot of people can frame it when they're religious, particularly, they always give credit to God. And so you can understand why this can relate to people that have more of a religious bent, because there's a good greater than themselves in that stage. If you've installed an idol in your own timeline, as it were, and you've created a God of yourself, well, you're always going to give credit to yourself, though. All right, but if we look beyond that, because that's the unavowed utopianism to a degree, because do you give credit to your ancestors? Do we give credit to our ancestors? Do we give credit? Do we pay enough reverence to the people that came before us? This is why this whole thing is orientated towards legacy, because at this moment on the face of the planet, we have to make a decision on the kind of way of life that we want to temporalize for future generations. This is what it is. This is a claim on us. And it works in a manner where we're potentializing our descendants to be grateful for what we did. Like to orientate towards life, to potentialize something that just wasn't there, so that when they live their lives and they live it in a manner that they have like a reverence that we don't have. Now, isn't that worth like potentializing? Like, isn't that worth meditating upon and looking at our way of life and understanding it like that? And then that is enough. Anyway, who knows? Until next time.